I just posted on LinkedIn once. It was like a Sunday night, and I literally just posted something like off my phone while laying in bed. Like I was not trying to go viral. I just like typed something up about remote work, and I like went to bed and woke up and it had hundreds of likes, and I was like, that's weird. Like that was the first content I ever posted. Later that day, I like got off a work call and like checked LinkedIn, and the LinkedIn commented on my post. It ended up getting like 45,000 reactions, and I got around 5,000 followers. People were like, I can't wait to see the rest of your content. And I'm like, I don't have any other content. Like I just had this one thought, and I was like really scared to post again. I was like, maybe I was just a one-hit wonder. No one's gonna care what I have to say. And I almost just didn't go for it.
This episode of Ken's Nearest Neighbors is powered by Z by HP, HP's high compute, workstation grade line of products and solutions. Today, I had the pleasure of interviewing Jess Ramos. Jess is a senior data analyst at Crunchbase, a LinkedIn learning instructor, and a content creator in the data space. She has a bachelor's degree in math, Spanish, and business, and a master's in business analytics. She's focused most of her career in the fintech data industry, and she's super passionate about impacting the world through data and technology. Jess is a huge advocate for women in STEM and loves to combat the stereotypes and support others. She lives and works remotely in Georgia with her husband and 4 pets, and she loves to volunteer within the community as an ESL teacher and middle school lacrosse coach. In this episode, we discuss the benefits and drawbacks of putting yourself out there online, how to weigh the decision of leaving a job very early, and how she's trying to help break the mold for women in STEM. I really enjoyed this conversation. I hope you do as well. So Jess, thank you so much for coming on the Ken's Nearest Neighbors podcast. I've obviously seen you blowing up on LinkedIn. You've had some pretty incredible things to say about, growing in this field, about women in technology and STEM. And I'm really excited to have you on today to just learn more about your story.
Yeah, I'm truly honored to be here today, and I can't wait.
Amazing. So something I like to do to get the listeners more familiar with the new guests is I'd love to hear about your first experience with data. Did you get into this field from one single pivotal moment, or was it more of a progression over time?
Yeah, so for me, it was kind of by accident. I was a math and Spanish double major in college, and then I had a business minor. So my business minor was something I just wanted to do to make myself more marketable on the job market. And I needed an easy A to complete my business minor. So I was just asking around, like, what's an easy A in the business school? And I landed on info systems. And info systems, it's kind of like a business technology, kind of like data kind of class. And that was my first experience with data. So for that class, I did like a Tableau project and just some basic data cleaning. And I thought it was just really fun and new and different than anything else I'd ever done. So from there, going into my senior year, I actually got an internship on campus working in enrollment management. And there I got to do like a lot of data cleaning, and I got to basically get paid to learn R on the job and just kind of get my feet wet with data. So that was my first experience with data. And then from there, I just decided to further my education and go to grad school for business analytics.
That's awesome. So Christina Stathopoulos is the one that introduced us. I'm already seeing some similarities in the Spanish speaking, as well as I believe her degree from NC State was related to info systems. It wasn't like a pure CS degree, but it was sort of this really unique hybrid degree. Coming from a little bit more of a business background into the data realm, what did you pick up, or what did you observe about that domain?
So I really came from more of like a math and Spanish background, like my business
math,
minor.
sorry about that.
No, it's okay. Business was kind of like dabbling for me. Like the minor, I took like one class in finance, one class in accounting, one class in marketing. And to be honest, I didn't love my business classes, if I'm being honest. Like they didn't get me super excited. I think my Spanish and math classes, they were more interesting to me because, I don't know, there was just an interesting challenge in the math and Spanish side of things. And I really liked that. So my business classes, I honestly did not enjoy them very much. I was like, oh, I have to finish this minor. I have to do it. And then when I got to the info systems class, that was the class where I was like, wait, this is actually really cool. And I think the reason why I was so interested in that particular class is because it was a way for me to use my math skills in the business world. Like I'd never really seen how to apply those math skills in the real world. And it kind of was like a bridge for me to use my technical background in the business world and showed me that it was possible.
I think that's really cool. I mean, there's this. I think a lot of the time, I mean, even with computer science, software engineering, it's almost hard to see how that fits into the business side of things. It's like, yes, we're building these. Why do we need these business folks? To me, that sort of, you know, center position or that middle ground is where sort of the magic happens. Especially, I consider myself an entrepreneur, and I like that because if I build something, I get to see the fruits of my labor. A lot of the
Mhm.
time, you're building something. Let's say it's a back end system. You don't actually get to see how that impacts the end goal. You don't get to see how the that makes money for the company or for the organization. And I think data analytics, like that space in there, it's a really pure tangible example that bleeds into the backend systems. It bleeds into all these other things because that's that interface point. And I really I get the same joy out of seeing value in my work that I it seems like you do from that intersection point. So from there, how did you progress? Were you just you go into this master's program? What did you pick up there? How did that end up in your current work, or getting to maybe a more traditional data role?
Yeah, so my master's program was business analytics. So it was a really good blend of the technical side of analytics, but also the business side and the soft skills. And it really taught me that even though I didn't love my business classes in undergrad, I did really need to refine myself as a business professional and work on those soft skills because that master's program is where I learned how important the soft skills are to analytics. And then at the same time, I was working on the technical skills like SQL and Python, econometrics, predictive analytics. So it was kind of me learning how to blend those together. And the fall of my master's program, I actually got an internship as a data analyst intern at a local fintech startup. And that was just kind of lucky, I guess, that this internship popped up. I did have to like compete for it. So it was a really good way to get my foot in the door, not only with analytics, but also in a fintech company. I'm super passionate about tech and startups. So it was really just very important experience for me to be able to put on my resume. And it still has impacted my career even until today.
That is awesome. So, but before I really want to dive into the fintech and your experience with startups, I feel like that's relevant to your work now. Before that, you'd mentioned something about soft skills you picked up in like the business side of that business analytics program. Can you help me define exactly what those are? I think a lot of the time we talk about soft skills as something that's really amorphous, and I always like to like define that as rigidly as, well, not rigidly, as completely as we can, because that helps, I think, everyone, including myself, understand where we can improve.
Yeah, totally. And I think that's the hard thing about some of these soft skills. It's hard to like define them super rigidly because they aren't always super tangible. It's not something you can just take a course on and learn and check off. I think a lot of soft skills you just learn by trial and error. You get some experience and you realize, oh, shoot, this did not work well. I need to do better in the future. So I think definitely communication. So being able to communicate with different stakeholders and being able to translate their needs into data and then do your analysis and translate it back to recommendations in their language. So just being that middleman, that translator between the stakeholders and the data. And then storytelling is another one, being able to, make a story out of the data and turn it into something that stakeholders can use. Presentation skills, that's another soft skill. A lot of times you're on calls having to think on your toes and, come up with answers to questions and answer them in a way to where stakeholders can understand them.
That's awesome. I really, I also I went to sort of a business program for one of my master's degrees, and I like resented it then, but I value it so much now. We had a whole course. I wouldn't say it was on soft skills, but it was on systems and communication. So, for example, how do you write a correct memo? This seems really like strange, but it's okay. You have to like it should be a certain length. It should have like each header in the memo should have a complete thought. Like um these interviews are awesome, and then explain why in the body of those types of things. And I think a lot of people are like, oh, I just have to be a better communicator, I have to be a better writer, but those things are encompassed in the structures you create for your writing, right? If you have a better framework and you're using that framework consistently, you're going to be a better writer. If you have a specific presentation framework of this is what we're going to be talking about, these are the important things, and you're conveying it, or a story, you have a beginning, a middle, and end, but in the beginning you need a hook. That structure makes these sort of soft things a lot more concrete. And I think building communication skills, very much, I would imagine, like what you did in your business analytics degree, is about creating better frameworks and teaching you those frameworks. And you can go outside them. That's sort of the art of the, or like more of the soft side of the soft skills. But having those tools in your toolkit are really powerful. You talk about like software engineering, you have design patterns that you use, and those help you write better code if you're doing object oriented programming. Um, like you can still write code without those, and you can write good code without those. But if you have those tools in your tool belt, that makes the quality of your overall code more consistent and better over time. And I think that's something I really wanted to throw in there. And just your story reminded me so much of how valuable that was to me.
Totally. And I can definitely relate. I think I also resented some of those things in school because you think, like, oh, this is really cheesy, it's fluffy, like, I'm not going to really need this. I definitely felt that way. I took a class in my master's program called Business Process Management. And it's basically just outlining business processes and making sure things get done in a certain order or at the same time as each other. And basically just making sure that the process is complete and as efficient as possible. And at the time, I remember, resenting that class. I'm like, this is so annoying. I don't want to have to learn this. And then I got in the real world and I saw actual examples where there wasn't a tangible process in place. So I think having those frameworks for building processes and setting standards for work are super important, even if they don't seem super important while you're in school learning them.
So that's a really good tangent into your experience in the real world. So what did you find was different about your internship and your more traditional work than what you were learning in school?
Yeah, so I actually vividly remember the day that I saw the database at the startup I was at for the first time. I just remember opening it and I saw like this huge list of tables on the left side. And I was like, what the actual heck? Because in school, you have like a perfect start schema, you have an orders table, and then you have like, a product table, a customer table, and all these other dimension tables like filtering into the orders table. And it's very cookie cutter. The data was pretty clean, everything was named consistently. It was super easy. Like you join, these two keys on these tables and everything just works out. But in the real world, companies have way more data than what you're used to seeing in school. It's messy. There's not always documentation. Maybe things aren't named consistently. And then data's messy. You have to clean the data. You have to decide how to handle the null values and the outliers. So I think the biggest shock for me was the amount of data and then the messiness of it. That was something I don't feel like I was fully prepared for. And in school, you just kind of have your training wheels on, and the real way you learn is getting in the real world and dealing with, real data for the first time.
So how should someone approach that? Essentially, you come into a new situation. I feel like this is probably a very common thing. It's your first job. You look at the all of the database tables and you're like, "Oh my goodness, I'm overwhelmed." Like, what are the tangible steps you took to break that down, make it useful, create an impact in the work you were doing?
Yeah, so I think I really struggled with imposter syndrome when I was feeling overwhelmed and just like completely shocked by what I was seeing. I immediately thought they shouldn't have hired me. They hired the wrong person. They should have hired one of the other people who applied. Like, I'm not good enough to be a data analyst. And now looking back, I just laugh at that because it was just a challenge I had to overcome. And luckily, I had a super supportive manager and team to really be there and support me. So I would say just always ask questions. If you're not sure on something, it's totally fine to say you don't know. You don't have to make up an answer and pretend to know something. It's better to just ask and just keep asking questions until you learn it. And I also take a lot of notes. First of all, it helps me process things. Second of all, I don't like to ask questions more than once. So anytime, and I still do this, anytime my manager back then would teach me something about the data or the tables, I would immediately write it down, draw a picture, do whatever I had to do to solidify the information and then document it for me to look back on in the future.
I love that process. I think so many people overlook documentation. Like if there isn't good documentation when you're starting out, create it. And by creating it, one, you help your company, you help everyone else understand it better who's coming on that's new. But you also yourself start to understand it better. There's no better way to understand a system than to try to document it and understand it. I also really like what you said about asking questions or you know just sort of prying open your managers or whoever's around. What a lot of people don't realize is that's expected. I've managed people. I expect new people to ask a lot of questions. They're not doing their job if they're not curious, or if they're not asking me how to do a lot of things. Like, you're completely
Mhm.
new. This is probably your first job. Early in your career, you're expected to not know anything, right? You're expected to come in and you know you're supposed to know basic things about SQL and Python or whatever the tools are you applied for the job, right? If you're asking me like, why am I getting this error with XYZ, that's not a question you should ask your manager. But if you're asking, why is this system structured like this? Or where can I find this information I've been looking for a while within this organization? Those are the exact things that your coworkers, your managers, whoever else is there are literally there to walk you through. There's I think that bifurcation of knowledge is like technical knowledge that you should know from your school or whatever versus the knowledge of the domain, or like that hybrid knowledge of like the system combined with the the nature of the work, or with the company specific knowledge or the industry specific knowledge.
For sure. And I think that speaks to how important it is to not only have a good manager in general, but especially for your first or second role when you're still just figuring out how to use data and your technical skills on the job. I was really lucky. My manager spent a lot of one-on-one time with me. He would sit down and explain things to me and draw it out because managers can't expect people to come in and just know like all the business domain, the company, the company insights and secrets. I mean, you can know the technical skills and bring your previous experience and knowledge with you, but there's always going to be those company details that you just aren't going to know unless you work there. So I think it's really important for managers to be patient with that and to take the time to teach that new person, all the processes and, the quirky stuff about the company that you just don't know until you experience it.
Yeah, I think so much of that is, a little bit of it's luck, a little bit of it is finding the right fit. Um, there's I find that most people have pretty good experiences with internships because there are certain expectations of interns that are different than full-time employees,
Yeah.
and you're able to create an environment where they can learn as well. I think early in your career, it's really important to be in a position where you feel like you can learn and grow. You're not just expected to do everything, come on board and just work. That's just not necessarily how it works, or like how you can be effective in your career. This episode of Kansas Nearest Neighbors is brought to you by Z by HP, HP's high compute workstation grade line of products and solutions. Z is specifically made for high performance data science solutions, and I personally use the ZBook Studio and the Z8 workstation. I really love that the Z workstations can come standard with Linux or WSL2, and they can be configured with the Data Science Software Stack Manager. With the Software Stack Manager, you can get right to the work of doing data science on day one without the overhead of having to completely reconfigure your new machine. Now back to our show. Can you talk a little bit about maybe your next role? If I recall correctly, you spent a relatively short amount of time at a company before you moved on. And I'm wondering what the difference is between, maybe a role that was a really good fit or or a role that wasn't quite as good a fit, and what you learned about yourself, what you learned about maybe your career as well.
Yeah, well, how much time do we have? Just kidding. So my first role, I will say I did get kind of lucky in a way because the company and manager, everything was a super good fit. And I was able to move up to a manager position. I got promoted a couple times and I just really built a lot of confidence and foundational skills for my career. So my next role, I ended up working as a senior risk analyst at Freddie Mac. And I realized pretty quickly it was not going to be the best long term fit for me, which was extremely disappointing. I went through a few months of job searching. I really tried hard to make sure I found a good fit. And I turned down other offers for more money to take that offer. So it was definitely really disappointing for me when I realized it wasn't a good fit. It really boiled down to a few things for me. The first thing is that the technology I was using was older than I was hoping to be using, and I was, told I would be using mostly SQL in my interview, but when I got there, I was using SAS 99.9% of the time. So I just really felt like my technical skills weren't going to grow in the direction that I wanted them to, which is, SQL, Python, newer technologies. So that was just really hard, not really seeing a growth path for me. And the overall culture was just very traditional. So I was expecting this team to be more of a fintech startup culture, and it wasn't quite like that. It was very corporate. It was very 9 to 5 on the dot. Um, yeah, it was really just not a great culture fit. And I realized pretty quickly I wanted to work somewhere that was more innovative and faster moving and somewhere where I could be myself. I don't want to ever feel like I have to fit in with, the team I'm on. I want to be able to be myself and bring my own skills, personality, and experience to the team.
So if I recall, you left that position in a pretty short amount of time. I think it was maybe 4 months. How did you weigh that decision? What went into that process? I feel like a lot of people are like, "Oh, I have to stay at a job for a full year, for 2 years. I have to hit this threshold." And I don't necessarily believe that is, there's a lot more that goes into a decision like that than just time at a company. I'd love to understand sort of how you understood that situation.
Yeah, totally. And it was a very difficult situation. It was around 2 months in where I realized, like, wow, this is long term not a good fit. And there were some other things going on behind the scenes that I don't necessarily want to say publicly, but there were just some other reasons where I was realizing, like, it's time to go and find somewhere where I'm happy and feeling valued and respected. So I definitely had that mindset in the beginning. I was like, I need to stay a year. It's going to look bad if I leave too soon. And then every week that would go by, I would shorten it. I'd be like, maybe I can stay for 10 months. And then the next week, I'm like, okay, maybe 8 months. I'm just like counting down when I felt like I could leave without it looking bad. And I really just talked to a lot of mentors. And I'm not going to publicly say who I talked to, but I had some mentors that were, older than me and some recruiter friends, just people that I was able to just kind of bounce ideas off of. And through just a lot of different conversations, I realized there was really no benefit of me staying. It was ruining my mental health. It destroyed my confidence in myself. And I was just overall really unhappy working there. And I didn't see my technical skills growing. So yeah, there was just really no benefit of me staying. And I think once I realized that, I realized as long as I can get hired at my next job, who cares if I was at a job for a short amount of time? And I will add too, it was a little difficult kind of explaining in interviews why I was wanting to leave. But I do believe that my longer tenure at my previous position, I was at that company almost 3 years. I think that helped show, my loyalty for when it is a good fit. And I think too, I was pretty like honest in my interviews. And I think that hiring managers were able to see that I'm not, a flaky candidate that's just going to jump ship every time. I think they saw in me that I am a very loyal, hardworking person that just ended up in a place that wasn't a great fit.
Yeah. Uh, you know, uh, your story, it seems very clear, right? It's like she worked somewhere for a long time, then she went into a role that wasn't a good fit and she left. I think what people don't realize is that happens a lot more common than you think, right?
Mhm.
When I was interviewing people, if someone came in and they were at their last company for a short period of time, I don't usually assume it's their fault unless it's like 4 or 5 companies, maybe 3 companies, where they've been like 4 months, 4 months, 4 months. That's kind of a red flag.
Mhm.
But if
Yeah.
you were at a company for 4 months, I generally would expect that the expectations that the company had of you or something during the interview process, something that they were telling you did not line up to the actual work. To me, that is a really important thing to realize is what story is the employer seeing when you're going through that. To me, it's like she knows what she wants. She understands that the last one wasn't a fit. Our company will, you know, if we're honest with her, will hopefully be a better fit. And we'd still like to have her as a part of this team. Honestly, in some way, that signals a good thing. Is that you understand what you want in your career, you know what you want to get out of it, and you're willing to make a change, not based on sunk cost, but based on opportunity cost, right? Because if you're working there a full another year, your ability to learn other skills on the job, which you might be getting somewhere else, your ability to make more money, your ability to do a lot of things are, there's a trade-off between working in that same role and quote unquote getting a year of experience, which is an arbitrary benchmark, versus um, skill acquisition, income, a lot of these other positive factors. So I think it was pretty brave, but also very intelligent that you made this decision when you did, because you know, how much would you have really been unhappy about your situation? How much, how soured on overall career would you be if you just continued in a situation that wasn't good for you, that you didn't like? Again, especially like relatively earlier in your career, it's time to make those decisions, and it's important to act on them.
Yeah, I think once I realized that my career wasn't going to grow there, that was just, it's really hard for you to invest all of your time and energy into a job when you don't see you growing there. So I think the career part was just hard for me, not seeing my skills growing in the direction I really wanted to. And I will say I have done 1,000 times more work at Crunchbase in the last 4.5 months since I started than I ever did at that last company in 4 months. So I'm definitely really happy with my switch career wise because I've learned so much at Crunchbase and I'm being challenged and working on different types of projects than I've ever done before. And then also the other side of it is like the mental health wellness part. I didn't realize how important that was to me until I was at that previous position. I I don't do well when I don't feel trusted and valued. So I really like to have kind of a flexible schedule. I like to work when I feel really inspired and motivated. If I'm feeling burnout, I might need to go take a 2 hour break one day and then, work a little later at night or just have some sort of flexibility to work in a way that matches my energy and working style. And I just wasn't able to have any sort of flexibility at my last job. So my mental health suffered. My physical health suffered. I was scared to like go on walks for too long. I wasn't doing my midday workout. So I think when I saw that that job was not only impacting my future career, but also my current mental health and wellness, I was just losing who I was as a person.
So, I mean, it seems like your current work is very different to the previous work. I was wondering if you could talk about what you're doing at Crunchbase, in the terms that you can describe. I imagine some work is proprietary, but if I recall correctly, Crunchbase is, sort of still in that financial technology space, but it's focused very much on the earlier side than it is at being like an established company like Freddie Mac.
Yeah, it's honestly in a really good sweet spot. We just got our Series D funding last summer. So it's a more mature startup, but still has that startup culture. So it's like a more stable, documented company, which I really like, but then it still feels really like startup-y in the ideas. So I'm actually not sure what's proprietary, so I'm just going to speak like really vaguely about what I'm working on. But I am working with a working group based on our trial experience. So I am like the analyst that is on that working group team, and I get to work with a lot of different stakeholders. And right now, we're actually working on launching an experiment for our trials. And I'm actually getting to be a part of the whole process from beginning to end. So designing the experiment, helping like figure out like the parameters in the scope of the experiment, designing the metrics, doing a power analysis to see how many or how big of a sample size we need for statistical significance. Then eventually we're going to launch the experiment, and then I'm going to get to interpret the results and make recommendations for stakeholders. So that's like the big project I'm working on right now. And it's really exciting for me because I haven't gotten to do a lot of product experimentation before. And that's something I really wanted to move into. And it's also a project I've gotten to have my hands on from beginning all the way to the end. So it's just a very satisfying project for me.
Awesome. So for some context, can you just describe like at a high level what Crunchbase does for the audience?
Yeah, so this is how I explain it. Crunchbase is a data company with company data. So we just have like a big database and a platform where users can access data on different companies. We are really big in like the startup space. So we have a lot of startup and investor data that doesn't exist elsewhere. And just some like examples, we have like funding history and investors, different contacts at companies. So it's a really good place to go if you're prospecting companies. So a lot of salespeople use our product to prospect companies that have funding with, XYZ parameters. And it's also really good for job seekers. So if you're looking for a job, it's a really good place to go. If you're looking at like a smaller company to see if and when their last funding round was to make sure they have funding.
So for everyone listening, probably a pretty useful resource, especially with a lot of the large tech companies slowing down hiring. From what I understand, a lot of more traditional companies, as well as companies that at least recently got funded, are probably still bringing on employees. So,
Hmm.
it's in my opinion, the job market. It's important to look where other people aren't. That means the pool of candidates is significantly smaller. Obviously, there are still people applying to positions, but an example I use is if you're at your university and you apply through your university's job board, the only candidates that are also applying there are from your university, right? And so if you're better than pretty much all those other candidates, you have a lot higher chance. If you're not that strong at your university, you might actually have a higher probability of getting an internship or a job on another platform where maybe your university really sticks out if it's a, for example, an elite institution. It's all about the market and understanding where you have the best opportunities. And a lot of the time opportunity is based on the number of other candidates. So maybe a side note for for people listening in who are really focusing on that job search. Um, working in the startup space, obviously a lot of that is focused. There's a lot of startups that are focused on AI. There's a lot of startups that are focused on content now. I'm interested in how you got into maybe the content creation process yourself. You're quite. I would go as far as saying famous on LinkedIn now, and I'd love to hear the story of how that all started.
Yeah, I always say that the content creation life, I did not choose the content creation life. The content creation life chose me. I just posted on LinkedIn once. It was like a Sunday night, and I literally just posted something like off my phone while laying in bed. Like I was not trying to go viral. I just like typed something up about remote work, and I like went to bed and woke up and it had hundreds of likes, and I was like, that's weird. Like that was the first content I ever posted. Like I wasn't actively posting or anything even. And then later that day, I like got off a work call and like checked LinkedIn, and the LinkedIn commented on my post. And I was like, what? So it just like blew up from there, and it ended up getting like 45,000 reactions, which was just like crazy. And I got around 5,000 followers, my first 5,000 followers from that post. And I was just like overwhelmed with the positivity. I did get a few haters, but most of it was positivity. A lot of people commenting in my DMs, and people were like, "I can't wait to see the rest of your content." And I'm like, I don't have any other content. Like I just had this one thought. So from there, I just kind of sat for a week and thought about it. And I was like really scared to post again. I was like, maybe I was just a one hit wonder. No one's going to care what I have to say. And I almost just didn't go for it. But I'm glad I did. And it took a few weeks, even months to really kind of find my niche. Like, who is my target audience? What does my audience like to hear? And from there, I've just like developed my personal brand and adapted over time. And here I am. It's only been 11 months since I posted that first post, and my life is completely different. So if anyone's listening that is scared to post on LinkedIn, I say go for it.
So what have you defined your niche to be?
I think originally I really thought it was data analytics and like SQL. I kind of evolved a little bit into SQL more because that content does well. SQL is something I love, I'm really passionate about. And then I think lately, I think my career stories have done actually better than a lot of my analytics work. So I think my niche is kind of like data analytics and tech career lifestyle.
Awesome. So part of lifestyle, and something that you're obviously very passionate about is women and technology, like women in technology. Sorry, and I'm interested if you could tell a bit more of that story. I think, you know, obviously you had a lot of positive comments around that first post, but you mentioned the haters. Unfortunately, it feels like there's a lot of haters associated in some sense with women in technology, or like they're at least probably it's probably a really small minority that are vocal, and I find that personally very sad. But I'm wondering how you manage that, what your experience has been, and if there's anything that we can do about that, especially on a public platform like LinkedIn.
Yeah, totally. I think that I think my passion for women in technology really started in the math department in undergrad, realizing I was one of the very few women in the department. And then I'm a very outspoken and like feminine woman. I like to dress up and, put myself out there. I didn't really fit the mold of what most people thought a math major should look like. So that's kind of where that passion developed for me. And then starting out my career, I noticed that it's just very male heavy. Like I didn't have a lot of female friends that also work in analytics, and it can be kind of lonely sometimes. And then just starting out in content creation, I've realized like how much hate some people have for women in STEM. Sometimes I post things about women in STEM, let's encourage others, let's be nice to people, and I literally get haters in my comments and DMs like, we don't need more women in STEM, like I just was shocked by the amount of hate that sometimes women receive for putting themselves out there. And I think a lot of it too is that people, I think women have to work harder to earn that respect. And I think people don't really like the idea of women being successful sometimes. I've seen strangers just like pick me apart and say that I'm only successful because of the way I look or the pictures I post or because my face or my body looks a certain way. And it's quite insulting. Like I went to grad school, I worked really hard to get where I am. So to say that it's only because I'm a woman and look a certain way is like insulting and baffling.
Yeah, I one, I don't understand why people would do this on a public platform. I mean, a lot of it happens on LinkedIn, where you know where they work, where you know what their name is, and to me that it's like this is career suicide. Something I really
Mhm.
like that you did is you posted a lot of I think it was for National Women's Day. You posted quite a few essentially like call outs of like these are people, a picture of a lot of the things people were saying. And I'm a huge believer in public accountability. And I think more people should do that because there's there's so many more people than just you that this is happening to. And that to me is if people realize there's repercussions for those types of actions, hopefully they'll change their behavior. I do believe they should change their behavior not because of that, but because of other reasons, like because it's wrong. But I think it probably has to start with them realizing that there are consequences for mistreating people, for essentially, like talking down to people based on who they are or their background or their gender, whatever they identify as. And that's a tricky issue. Again, this is happening on LinkedIn. It's significantly worse on YouTube, Reddit, some of these other platforms that are more anonymized. Is it part of the platform's responsibility to manage some of that? Is there something systematically that can be done, or is this a human problem that there's just always been and always will be, maybe like haters or detractors in the world?
I think a lot of it really is a human problem that we do need to evolve as a society. And just, that's why I try to use my platform for what I use it for. I want to speak out about it and raise awareness because every time I post something like that, people are like shocked. Like, I can't believe this is happening. People just don't know. So I think by raising awareness, we can start to like develop society to have more empathy and respect for others. But I do think part of it is also part on the platform too, because I think the platform should be able to filter some of that stuff out. Like, I'm really big on freedom of speech. I welcome people to politely disagree with me. I want people to have conversations on my post. If you have a different idea or a disagreement, please share it, but just make sure you're respectful. But I do think the platforms should filter out certain keywords. Like, if I get a DM and it has the word girlfriend or like the phrase "you're hot," like why are these things not getting flagged? Like, there are certain keywords that should be flagged and looked at by the platform. And another example I just thought of too is a few weeks ago, someone called Carly Taylor the B word in comments on a LinkedIn post. And it's crazy to me. It's like, why would the B word not be filtered out or like flagged as, harassment? Because that's just a blatant form of hate speech that I don't think the platform should even allow.
Yeah. I mean, I think you defined it perfectly with harassment, right? That's exactly what it is. I think freedom of speech is different from personal attacks on people. I mean, you can attack ideas as much as you want. I think that that's perfectly fair game, but attacking individuals based on how they look, how they talk, a lot of these things, in my mind, that just shows that you don't have anything constructive to say about the argument, right? You're outclassed by a post. You don't have a rebuttal that is intentional or intelligent. And that's how every conversation goes. If you're having a disagreement with someone and they call you stupid or something like that, it's like, no,
Yeah.
you don't have anything smart to say back. You have no rebuttal. You cannot compete with me in terms of logic or any of these things. And that's how I frame any negative things. Is like, look, if this is all they can say, then I've won, right?
Mhm.
I'm what I'm putting out in the world is more meaningful than what they are, and all they can do is detract. Like a lot of times, like, what have you done? We're trying to build a community. We're trying to provide education, and I mean, do you want that to stop? Do you want nobody to put out educational information because you're not and you're salty about it, or because other people are more successful than you have to knock them down? um I always think that this stuff points to inadequacy in other people, or their lack of essentially like some missing piece in what they're working on, or like in themselves, that they see some insecurity. That's the word I was shooting
Totally.
for.
Yep.
um you know there is a trade-off right? There's benefits, like financial benefits, work benefits, social benefits of posting online and creating a brand and putting yourself out there. And there's also the costs that you described. I mean, personally, like this is really sad, but as a man, I face virtually none of the criticism that you face. Like some people do comment on my appearance, um, or they say I sound like Elon Musk, which I think is kind of funny.
That's
but
hilarious.
it's like not it's not derogatory. It doesn't feel the same as what you experience. Like Carly, my friend Tina on YouTube, like they comment on her hair all the time. Like, why don't you put it down today or something? It's like this is ridiculous. But so from my perspective, the drawbacks of posting online, creating a brand, are relatively little. But from your perspective and from a female perspective, there are definitely different constraints. It's like a different cost benefit analysis. How do you rationalize, or how do you view putting yourself out there, and the benefits versus the costs? Like you obviously still do it. Like, what is your equation for saying, okay, it's worth it to me to do this, even though there is some of this like public backlash?
Yeah, I think something interesting with me is I've grown my account so quickly that I've had to really grow some thick skin and grow into my role as a content creator just really quickly. And I was really shocked when I first started getting haters. Like, I think that's when I realized, like, oh my gosh, I've made it. Like, people hate me for no reason. Like, I must be doing something right, or I must be successful if people are just hating on me. Something that my husband told me actually a week or two ago, he said, you will never have a hater that's more successful than you. And I realized, I was like, oh my gosh, most of the people who hate on me, like, I mean, if you look at them on LinkedIn, like, for the most part, they're not other content creators who are putting themselves out there. They maybe have been in the same job for like a really long time. Like, they haven't had the same career opportunities and career trajectory that I've had. So I think just remembering that you can't get your self-worth from haters. You have to look at like the things you've accomplished and just keep in mind that they're going to hate you for no reason no matter what you do. I think that really helps. And as a woman, it does suck. I do feel like we get more hate for anything that we do on LinkedIn. And I just try to remember all the people I've helped. I get a lot of like DMs sometimes where something I said really helped someone out, or maybe my engagement on a post connected someone to a recruiter and they got the job. So those positive stories where I've actually impacted people's lives and made an impact on them, those really outweigh like the haters for me. The haters are just such a small percentage, maybe like 1% of the people I interact with on the platform. And on top of that, the career growth. I am in a really exciting time as a content creator with, figuring out long term how I'm going to sustain my content creation. I just released my first LinkedIn course. So I've just gotten all of these cool opportunities from it. And I'm just always going to take the higher road if people want to hate on me because, I wear too much makeup or I have on Peloton leggings in my picture. Like, hate on me all you want.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to put it. It seems like you're able to sort of filter out the noise that's associated with the domain and focus on a lot of the good things. I think a lot of our challenge is that we take criticism, we take negative things, and they're amplified in our brain. We focus on those, and those are a lot more relevant or prevalent than the good things that happen. It's like almost 20 to 1. Like I'll remember all the bad things that people say. I could probably pick out and tell you a lot of them compared to all the good things that people have said. And that's, kind of fairly unfortunate. But the way I framed it, that I think has been really constructive for me, is what do the people that know me the best say about the things that I'm producing? Like, we're designed to be tribes. I don't think we're designed to connect with 100,000, 200,000 people at a time. That's too much information, too much difference of opinion, too many cultural differences. I mean, I think one thing that's particularly prevalent with, women online is that there's essentially all these different cultures that view women very differently, all in this one place. And if your audience was primarily from perhaps like the United States, you'd probably have very different comments, or I would expect a lot of the comments would be more socially aware. But the world is a very large place, and everyone is in this melting pot of social media. And I think we're designed to be responsive or to enact with our specific tribe. And our specific tribe, historically, the way we've developed has been around us like 150, 200 people. And the idea that other people outside of my local community or my local group would be able to truly give me feedback on what I'm saying that's not specifically relevant to them is a difficult thing. Like, I don't think that my advice necessarily scales to everyone. For example, if I'm giving job advice about how to create a resume, it's different in the US than it is in like India. And
Mhm.
I have to realize that who is my actual audience that I can provide the most value to. And if the people are haters that are not part of my audience, that can't resonate and can't relate to what I'm saying, it's not that they're meaningless or that they shouldn't be considered, but I shouldn't occupy my time thinking about the feedback from them, because I can't control that situation. I can't control an experience that is so different from what I've lived, or what I can put out there and advise on, or tell a story about. And at least for me, that's kind of cathartic. It's like, I can't serve everyone. I shouldn't try to serve everyone. I also, since I can't serve them, I probably shouldn't listen to their feedback or their negativity as intently.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think the international piece definitely plays a part into it. I mean, I've had men comment and be like, "Women should be in the home." And I'm like, "Okay." Like, I work from home. Just kidding. But there's definitely that like cultural element that people just have different cultures in other countries. So I definitely try to keep that in mind and be patient, just because they may have grown up differently. They may have different standards for women in their country. And I never want to assume that someone's going to completely agree with me and have the same like background and experiences I've had. But I do check sometimes to see where people are from, like on their LinkedIn profile, because I am curious. But I think shockingly, a lot of the haters that I have had have been from the US. And those are the ones
Interesting.
I'm not as patient with. Like, if someone is in a different country, I most likely haven't been to that country and don't know much about it. So I'm not going to judge them. I'm going to, love them from afar, maybe give them a little piece of my mind, like, hey, actually, this is my viewpoint on this, but, ultimately let it go. But it's the people, when I look at their profile and it says they live in California or New York or, in the US, like those are the ones that shock me the most and I think hurt because,
California, definitely very shocking.
yeah, they don't have an excuse. And I will say there's a trend as well. Most of my haters are like middle aged men, honestly. And that's just like a trend. I'm not saying all middle aged men are haters, but I'm just saying that most of them tend to fall in that demographic. So I
Huh.
think a lot of it too might just be, just a generational difference.
Yeah, I think generational. I would also say that on average, middle-aged men run the United States.
That is also true.
And I think that there's also some concern from them, probably, that image is shaking, and they're worried about losing their positions or whatever it might be to someone who's more qualified, younger, potentially female, right? Um, and that to me is like, maybe even them feeling like threatened or something like that, which I think is absolutely crazy, but
Good. I'm just
who
kidding.
knows? They
That's
should
the thing,
be.
though. I don't think anything has to be taken from men or from middle-aged men. Nothing has to be taken away from anybody to give all people the equal amount of respect. So I'm advocating for women in STEM, especially younger women in STEM, because I think it's exciting when younger women get into these fields. But we don't have to take anything from anyone else. We can all be successful together.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. Some of the most creative engineers, like some of the best just overall engineers I know are women, and I'm like you think about the profession as a whole. I can't think of one that would be, well, I can barely think of any that would be as equitable in terms of like what you do. Like everyone is like sitting here like thinking there's a lot of like, you know, like pure engineering work you have to do. There's a lot of problem solving. There's a lot of um, like other relevant skills that I don't see any like tangible differences in between women and men on, right? Like to me, that's like if you were to take that argument, it's like, look, like a lot of this stuff is pretty relevant to everyone. Um, and I don't see any case studies that would suggest that, anyone is not on an equal playing field in terms of skill or ability to do data engineering work, any of these types of things differently. Um, and it maybe culturally it's a lot less friendly to women, but that's something it seems like is changing over time. And I love to see. Are there any things that you're like passionate about outside of your own work that are pushing for more education awareness to get more women into STEM, or like special interest groups or whatever it might be, or is it more of a personal stand that you're taking?
So most of my work for women in STEM is done on LinkedIn. I think I have like the gift of being able to have this voice and platform, and I want to use it to better the world and make it a better place. But I also do like some mentoring as well. Like I coach a middle school lacrosse team right now, and I just love being able to love those girls and coach them during a really vital time of their life. They're in middle school, so they're just becoming young women right now, and I just like being able to show them, like, hey, I'm a data analyst. I work in tech. You can do it too. You don't have to go do, these other jobs that women tend to go into unless that's what you want to do. And I have girls on my team. They want to be doctors. I have one girl on my team. She's in accelerated math. And I told her I was proud of her because I was too in middle school. So it's just a really cool way to connect with local young women and just be kind of a role model for them and show them that just provide that representation for them that they can work in STEM one day if they want to.
I think that's beautiful. I also think that, for example, on LinkedIn, the audience maybe starts at like 18, 19, 20 years old. It's cool that you have a touch earlier in a career, because I think a lot of the challenge with having more women in STEM is implanted when girls are younger. I mean, I don't know this for a fact, but I would speculate that, they're conditioned either in a family environment, school environment, whatever it is, that there are certain roles for men, certain roles for women. And I'm wondering if there's anything that's being done that you know of to sort of debunk that, whether it's accelerated programs or, culturally, it seems like that is also where a lot of this stems from. I think, for example, something that's been changing is like college attendance is like women are more prone to go to college now than men in the United States. That culturally has been a massive shift. Is there a shift that slowly starts to move backwards that I think women being more involved in these STEM technology type programs is going to sort of pass over time?
Yeah, and I think so. I think it does start at a young age. And I think those are the hardest things to kind of break down because it does come down to people's own subconscious bias and just like the conditioning of women to go into these, caregiving and teaching roles like nursing, teacher, secretary, which those are all great professions. If that's what you want to do and you're happy to work in those fields, go do it. I'm still happy and proud of you. But I just don't think that women are shown as much opportunity at a young age that they can go into engineering, they can work with data or math or science. And I think it is getting better in some ways, but I remember being in high school and feeling kind of like out of place in math. Like I can't really explain it. I was doing really well in the class, but I just felt like, oh, this isn't like a career for me. This is just to like get the math credit so I don't have to take it in college. I didn't really see it as something I could do later on because it just didn't feel like me. And then going into college, I noticed I went to a small private school and I noticed pretty instantly that I didn't really fit the mold. A lot of like the older professors, they definitely treated the men and the women kind of differently in class. So, for example, a man in the class would ask a question and the teacher would be like, that is a great question and explain it. And then I would ask a question and, my professor would be like, we already went over this last class. You should come see me in my office. So I think just like little things like that get ingrained into women's head throughout the educational system. And as young women, that makes them feel like they're not smart enough to be in math or it's not for them.
Yeah. I was thinking for some reason about the TV show Dexter's Laboratory that I would watch, and like it like really aggressively portrays,
Dee.
Dexter
Yep.
as, yeah, as like, he's doing math, like Dee Dee's always in a ballet outfit dancing around. Maybe that's not the best example because, for example, like SpongeBob, oh my god, I think it's Penny the squirrel. Like she's a scientist, she's doing all this stuff underwater. Maybe that was just like a very progressive show at the time, but I,
Yeah.
I would say overwhelmingly the things that I was exposed to as a kid, it was like, kind of boys are this way, girls are this way. Um, and I think, part of that is from where we consume what we consume. I wonder what social media and a lot of these things are saying about those things. I mean, like the biggest social media celebrities, what are they famous for? The men and the women, like where does that break down? I mean, there's some really cool ones like Physics Girl. I think she's kind of sick right now. Hopefully she gets better. There's Simone Gertz who are doing really cool things with technology. And to me, maybe that's a great equalizer in this is that social media content, it's a pure representation of people. There's no background mold associated with it. There's no overarching power that says like this is what we're producing, this is the message we're saying. Everyone gets to tell their own story, and every boy, every girl can find their own story online through that someone else is telling from someone that at least is the same, has a similar background to them. And to me, that's a beautiful thing. I hope it plays out that way. Maybe it doesn't, and we, free range content creation goes by the wayside. But again, hopefully that is only like a Black Mirror type of situation. Um, I'd love to hear more about your LinkedIn Learning course, how you got hooked up with them, and what you're hoping to achieve there.
Yeah. So at the time they reached out to me, I only had 6,000 followers. So I think they just saw like the passion and excitement in me and saw like the potential that I had. They just reached out and they were like, because it was a post about inspiring women in STEM. And they were like, how would you like to be someone to teach these women in STEM? And I was like, are you for real? Me? Like, I don't know if I can do that. So for the next like 6 months or so, I kind of went back and forth designing the course, like what I wanted each video to be about, what I wanted the topic to be about. And then it was crunch time the last few months writing all the scripts. And a lot of people ask, like, did you write the course yourself? Yes. Everything in the course I wrote all by myself. Um, so yeah, and then in December, I got to fly out to California with the Megan Liu. We told LinkedIn like we have to film the same week or we're not coming. Just kidding, but we did tell them we had to film the same week. So we got to film our courses in booths next to each other, and it was just a super fun experience. And now 3 weeks later, my course is about to hit 10,000 learners. So it's just like it's crazy to see like how much work I put into it and to see that almost 10,000 people have taken my course now. It's just a really awesome experience, and it makes me proud that I can also represent as a woman because I want other women out there to see other women in data and feel encouraged by it.
Yeah, I think a lot of the major players in the course education space around data, around engineering, are all men. I think there's one. I think it's Broken Lizard or something. Broken Lizard, I think, is not the real. It's something Lizard who does deep learning courses, and her stuff is really good. But there's very few, women that are involved in the teaching side, and I would imagine most of your math teachers were probably men. Most of the educators, and I think that that's a really important place to start. Is who is teaching the group. I got really fortunate in grad school. I had um, a female SQL teacher, and I know in my program, this was for my business coursework. A lot of the girls were kind of surprised by that, and they were empowered by that. And they're like, "Oh, I can do this too. She's teaching this course." Like it. seeing someone like you or learning from someone like yourself, I think is a very powerful like psychological, I don't know if it's tool, but a psychological frame to come from. And I'm a big believer. I actually think like augmented reality or AI can play a pretty cool and important role in that. You know, what if I make a course and AI lets the listener, you know, augment me to be whatever, you know, like have them teaching themselves the course or something like that. Like to me, that's really sick. It's like, oh, I'm learning for myself, whatever it is. But there's like little things that we can do that I think encourage people and empower people to learn within this domain. And in some sense, they can be enabled in technology.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think representation is huge because if you don't have someone to look up to and see yourself in, it's hard to keep going and feel like there's a spot for you. Um, I will say too, Christina and Helen Wall, like they're the two first like female content creators I found on LinkedIn in the data space that I really just looked up to from the beginning. And just seeing them just like further along in their careers than I am was just really inspiring for me because I saw them creating content and be successful at it. And I was like, okay, maybe I can do this. So I do think representation is important. And I think at least something I really want to show people is you don't have to fit a certain mold. You don't have to be what a typical data analyst should look like. It's okay if you want to be feminine or outspoken or, you know, like someone I think of is Carly Taylor being in the gaming space. Like you don't have to fit the mold of being a woman necessarily, what people expect you to be like. You can be your own person and use your voice, and then in return, you can be representation for the next person to come along who is also similar to you.
Yeah, I love that point. The idea of being yourself is actually a massive comparative advantage. Right? If my content was exactly like everyone else's, why would anyone watch it? If I was exactly like every other candidate, why would anyone pick me for a job? Right? There's something inherently powerful about telling your own story and like personifying yourself in every scenario you're in. Um, you know, if yourself is not that likable, then you might have an issue. But on the other hand, I would say it's everyone's uniqueness or idiosyncrasies which makes them relatable. It's like, oh, this person is, you know, they're different than the other creators because of XYZ. Like I resonate with that. I'm a little bit like that as well. And I think everyone should probably celebrate their differences a little bit more, especially online. Right? Like the best posts, the best interesting things come from unique experiences that are case studies that tell a lesson, that tell a story. And the most generic posts do terribly. So,
Mm-hmm.
you know, why would you not lean into that differentiation if you wanted to make a name for yourself, if you wanted to be different, if you wanted to excel past what the normal is? So, uh, you know, that's all the questions I had, Jess. How can people learn more about you? Where can they find you? Potentially reach out if they have questions. The floor is yours.
Yeah, so you can find me on LinkedIn, obviously. I'd love it if you listen to the episode, like DM me, tell me what you thought about it. If there's anything else that you wanted to say about the episode, I'd love to chat about it. You can also find me on Instagram as Jess Ramos Data. I just moved to Instagram a few weeks ago, so I've got some slightly funny content coming out. It's been really fun learning how to make video content, so follow me there. Also, check out my LinkedIn course. I'm really proud of it. And if you do take the course and you like it, it would mean a lot to me if you could give me a good review and actually write me back some feedback. I read all the feedback I get. Um, Other than that, I have a few resources kind of in the pipeline that I'm working on releasing soon. So stay tuned through LinkedIn and Instagram for those announcements.
Amazing. I will leave all those links in the description below. Thank you so much for coming on, Jess.
Thanks for having me.